What if one of history's greatest geniuses, my fellow long-haired man of many talents, Leonardo da Vinci, actually shows us what not to do in order to live lives of learning? You know, we often praise da Vinci for his boundless curiosity and his polymathic range, his autodidacticism. But when you really dig into his notebooks, a strange pattern emerges. Da Vinci gave himself many brilliant learning projects and many artistic projects. But many of them, like the Adoration of the Magi and St. Jerome in the Wilderness, unfinished, abandoned. And some of his projects he revisited later with only partial follow-through, a bit of dabbling. Now, he certainly got away with dabbling because we remember him, but many of us will be held back by this problem. And the fact that Da Vinci had it reveals something very powerful about autodidactic personality traits and what self-learners who want to live lives of accomplishment can do so that they don't spend their lives as wishful dabblers and even get away with a little bit of dabbling from time to time, perhaps, though I try to avoid it myself. Because if you're not careful, you might be falling into a trap that, yes, Da Vinci managed to escape in the long term. But how many Da Vincis never made it because they didn't have this video to walk you through the most important personality traits for autodidacts, how to actually develop them, and how to avoid this blind spot that kept Da Vinci stuck. He literally did not finish some of the most epic projects he started, and how great would it be if he had finished? How great would it be if you finished the things that you started? Are you ready? Let's dive in deeply, because mastering this one trait might be the difference between spending the rest of your life dabbling and stopping again and becoming not only an autodidact of accomplishment, but the architect of your dream life. Now, in case you don't know this term, autodidact, it just means anyone who takes full responsibility for their learning journey. And you're already on the right path if you're doing that, but you can get better. It's not about rejecting teachers or refusing to read books or take courses. It's about initiating your own learning process and doing so with a sense of personal accountability that is a personality trait that some people are born with, but I'm going to help you develop it even if you don't have accountability, based on what I've been doing for decades to get my own accountability going. Projects like memorizing 1,700 words in Sanskrit to chant various mantras, publishing books as part of one of my businesses, applying for grants as a PhD and former professor turned independent researcher, the person who puts this channel together, learning multiple languages, and even making my own thumbnails for YouTube. I've had to develop these traits in myself, and all of it comes down to mastering them with my meaning of mastery, which is constant study and practice in a loop. And I learned how to do it by researching how the brain learns and how the brain remembers, and really finding out that these traits of other successful people that I wanted to become like, it's not a quirk. These are psychological levers, tools that you can shape thanks to neuroplasticity in the brain and manipulating your motivations, manipulating in a good way, of course, and learning to expand your memory capacity. And memory training is my specialty. Now, one last point that's very important before we get into these traits and we reveal the problematic trait that almost meant that Da Vinci maybe would be someone we didn't even know about. You don't have to be born curious. You don't have to be born resilient. And you don't have to be born with the ability to hold yourself accountable. And I have seen a need to increase all of what we're going to talk about today, because if you haven't seen my recent video about the Memory Palace bookshop I'm building, well, you don't know yet about how much I've had to change my personality. I mean, I literally had to pick up a mop and find the inner resources to just get a job done, even though I didn't want to. And I have to get curious about all kinds of certain skills and topic areas and things dealing with law and GSD. And it's just mind-melting, and I have to work on what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to help you push through resistance, build new systems to stay on track, And you're going to absolutely train yourself for these traits. And just understand, I'm right there with you. So, in terms of installing these traits into your system deliberately and with surprising ease, let's start with the engine that runs it all, at least in my experience, curiosity. Now, curiosity isn't just about wondering about stuff. It's about turning your questions into projects and then seeing those projects through with what you might call an intelligent risk assessment. Take Benjamin Franklin, for example, and his famous kite experiment. Most people know the story at a surface level. A man flies a kite in a lightning storm and proves electricity is real. But what they miss is the strategy behind it, the turning of the question into a project. Franklin didn't just grab a kite and head out into a thunderstorm on a whim. He actually knew about different ways to run the experiment. He calculated the risk, and instead of using metal wire like other experimenters had done and wind up putting himself in injury or worse, Franklin came up with the idea about having a kite. And he relied on, I think it was called indirect conduction. He kept himself dry under a shed roof, I think, and he insulated himself. And he just knew enough about the danger to stay alive while testing his theory. The question becomes a project, not reckless curiosity. It's thoughtful curiosity. And this was engineered exploration. That's what made Franklin so successful. And it's something that you can model. And there's another key here. Franklin journaled frequently, and so did Thomas Jefferson, Da Vinci, obviously, and many, many other successful people. Journaling by hand is a major clue for you. And what it does is it helps you increase your curiosity, because that's how you can turn the question into a project, but also track the results from the project. And I've found that even if a topic feels boring, writing about it, even writing badly or sloppily, can help keep you moving forward. When I was learning Mandarin, for example, I hit a rough patch. The excitement wore off. But I used the Freedom Journal to track every little part of my goals, break them down into tiny daily goals, and it helped keep my curiosity alive. And, I was able to journal through topic exhaustion many times in my career. And topic exhaustion is this weird moment when something you love starts feeling pointless. So curiosity isn't just a feeling, it's a habit. And journaling is one of the best ways to make sure it doesn't fade. Here are some simple steps to wrap up curiosity that you can try if you want to strengthen your curiosity muscle. Write down one question every day that genuinely interests you, no matter how strange it might be. And then start a small challenge. Turn it into a project. Research that question. Maybe it's just 10 minutes. Maybe it's half an hour. But now when you're on the internet, instead of doom scrolling, you're looking for something. You're hunting for the process that you can use to solve the mystery of the question. And then just write down in a couple of sentences what you discovered. You can keep a curiosity tracker, if you like, in your journal or a spreadsheet where you record the questions and where you followed up. Keep those links. I do this all the time. I have spreadsheets filled with links so that I don't lose them. And yes, it's a little bit of overhead. It takes a bit of time, but it's worth it because I can memorize lots of things, but I'm not going to sit around memorizing URLs of complicated websites. The key is to notice what kind of questions make you want to take that action and then steer yourself deeper and deeper into those kinds of questions. And when questions come up that you have to deal with but you're not all that curious about, well, you'll be better able to just simply go with it anyway, because you'll have trained your procedural memory to follow through on the transformation of questions into projects. All right, before we go further, if you're getting value from this video and what we've talked about already, give it a thumbs up and please hit subscribe. Join us on this mission. I publish new videos on memory, self-education, and cognitive mastery pretty much every week. And if you're serious about learning faster and thinking deeper, please make sure you don't miss out by enabling your notifications. Now let's get back to it because I've got more traits to talk about. We got curiosity, and another big one that I've had to work hard on, is called openness to experience. Now, openness sometimes gets misunderstood as just being open to new things or being a multi-potentialite. But it's so much deeper than that. It's about emotional courage, the willingness to step outside accepted norms, to challenge the consensus, to put your ideas into the world even when you know rejection is guaranteed. Margaret Cavendish is a perfect example of a person who was able to do this. She lived at a time when women weren't even supposed to write, let alone publish on philosophy or science. She was mocked for her intellect, and academics dismissed her. The Royal Society, as far as I understand, wouldn't admit her so that she could study, but she did not stay quiet. She read voraciously natural philosophy, poetry, politics, theology. She was all over the place, and she imagined alternative realities, and she self-published her ideas that were so provocative, they still make modern readers uncomfortable. I mean, there's some wild stuff in this book that I'm holding now. And then Cavendish did something astonishing. She used fiction to express scientific and political theory. She embedded philosophy into storytelling in the Blazing World. And this is what I call cross-modal learning. So if you haven't read The Blazing World, it's so wild. It's amazing. It makes me think of Aquaman every time I read it. And she was doing this cross-modal learning, bringing things together in a multidisciplinary way long before these terms even existed. And she did it while her society was closed. And she took steps to stay radically open. So inspiring. And here's the part that matters for you. You don't need a printing press to do it. Today we have all the tools to do what Cavendish did. You just need to be brave enough to use the tools that we have. You can publish so much easily on the internet now, and I've used the internet for a lot of my career, but personally in the beginning I had very, very low openness. I used to only have slides on the screen and you'd only hear my voice. And that persisted for a long time, pretty close up until I published my book, The Victorious Mind. And this book contains some of the most personal experiences I've ever shared, and it was very difficult to get myself to do that. I said things in there that I didn't think I'd ever say publicly. Publishing it, though, cracked me open, and I've learned more and more about myself, others. I've learned more about memory, but it's because I leaned into the discomfort. So if you feel stuck in one narrow range of interests, and if you want to become more open as a personality trait and stretch yourself intellectually and creatively, and yes, even emotionally, openness is the trait that will free you. And then here's a practical way to start developing it. Pick a subject outside of your usual interests. Be open to it. And maybe if you hate country music, listen to country music as a starting project. But I'm really thinking here about books. Read a book or an article without judging yourself, without judging it, and then write something about it. Even if it's just a tweet-length takeaway, share it somewhere. Maybe even share it privately with a friend, but do it in writing. Because writing and then putting it in someone else's hands, that's the core of publishing. Publishing has the word public in it, more or less, and it's sharing. And that simple act can help you be more open. But the thing about Cavendish that I want to highlight here is she didn't just open doors for herself by being open to dealing with a closed society. She helped open doors to others. And the fact that her books are still in print and you can read them today, she's still doing it long after her death. So, openness, a big one. Practice it. It's impossible to stress the importance of the next character trait or personality trait too much. It's the tolerance for ambiguity. Imagine this. It's the year 1600. A man stands in the center of the Camp de Fiori in Rome. He's gagged, he's shackled, and he's been imprisoned for 8 years, interrogated, humiliated, tortured, and now he's about to be burned alive at the stake. Why? Well, because he dared to say that the universe is infinite. He dared to say that there was no center and probably no edge, and there was no single authority who could grasp the whole. His name was Giordano Bruno, and he looks like this fellow here on this golden book. A very, very important book, a dangerous book. And in this book, well, in lots of his books, he wasn't just defying the church. He was defying certainty itself. You see, Bruno didn't claim that he knew the truth as such. I mean, he basically thought he knew the truth, I'm sure. But he claimed that no one could claim the church on human authority. And so, in a way, that is an authoritative statement, which is why I'm making a bit of a joke there. But he said not the Pope, not Aristotle, and I think really, at the end of the day, the implications were that he believed not even he himself had the final authority. But here's the kicker. Bruno believed that the human mind, when trained through memory, could begin to mirror the infinite complexity of the universe. We could be something like the universe itself. Now, he's not playing around with cosmology. He's building mental architecture. And for that, Bruno was turned to ashes. But yet, because he stood up to the church and because he stood up to the temper of the times, we still have his works. This is a beautiful edition here of On the Shadows of the Ideas, translated by John Michael Greer. He's been on my podcast before. He's going to be on it again in the near future. And the point is that you've been paralyzed by uncertainty, right? Ambiguity has held you back, hasn't it? You've opened a book and realized halfway that you were in over your head, and then you've read two opposing arguments and you couldn't decide which one was right. It's happened to all of us. Well, Bruno lived in that space, not for a moment, for most of his life. That takes tolerance. Tolerance specifically for ambiguity, and I believe it's one of the most underdeveloped, undervalued traits in modern learners. So if you want to be a really good autodidact, stop trying to get clean answers for everything. Stop chasing after certainty. Stop needing to be right. I mean, Bruno kind of needed to be right, so I'm not trying to romanticize him. I'm just trying to say that if you go deeper and deeper into self-education, you're going to go into realms where things are more and more confusing. And there's this beautiful new edition of a book about Bruno called Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition, if memory serves. Yes. And this is by Francis Yates. Gallaglass put this book out. They sent it to me. And, the truth of the matter is that he was a complicated guy. And I totally agree with my own reading of Bruno, but this book I don't totally agree with. Yet it's a fascinating book. And I have to deal with ambiguity because Yates, who wrote that book, she says one thing and I conclude another. I don't feel lost about it, though. I feel confused, and I feel that I can lean into it, and that's where the growth actually starts to begin. So Bruno taught me how to strengthen this trait in ways that you can translate to strengthen your own tolerance for ambiguity. So read books that contradict each other on purpose. Both sides of the aisle, as they say. Watch videos that you disagree with and take notes and then summarize the arguments you think are wrong and then just ask, what if they were right? What is the evidence that makes them think that it's right? Or what are the thought processes? What are the questions they turned into projects that have led to such outcomes that you can't stand? That's what I'm doing right now with this new edition of Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition by rereading it. I'm doing it again because I'm writing a book about Bruno myself. Also, myself, and it might help you as well, I started to study symbolic logic. Not to simplify things. No, that doesn't simplify things at all. But to learn more about how paradoxes work, the different kinds of paradoxes, and to help myself stop trying to be so certain, stop trying to think that there is an answer, and stop trying to be so capable of actually arriving at a conclusion. One of the things I discovered is what some philosophers call the true contradiction, when two seemingly opposite things are both true somehow. Bruno never ran away from that. He built memory palaces from it. He literally did, and you could read all about it and get into it with this book on the shadows of the ideas. So, here's the question. Can you hold opposing ideas in your mind without exploding? Can you let go of the need for resolution and stay with the discomfort? If you can, and if you work at it, you'll be training tolerance as if tolerance were a muscle. And then you won't just survive complexity, you'll thrive in it. All right. The next thing I want to talk about, it's about belief. But belief can sound really fluffy. So, scientists call the personality trait related to belief self-efficacy. And research has shown how self-efficacy predicts academic performance. I think a lot about Richard Feynman, the physicist, Nobel Prize winner. He was able to figure things out that were really difficult because he believed in himself. But he did it not through brute force or genius. He had a method, which has been called for years the Feynman technique. And what he would do is he would explain the ideas that he didn't understand as simply as he could. He would spot the gaps, and then he would fill them in and then explain it again until there was no friction left. So he didn't just do it once, he did it constantly, like a musician practicing scales, until each note dissolved into the muscle memory of the mind and the muscle memory of the hand and so forth. And then later he wouldn't show off. He would say to his students, the reason why that you don't understand physics is because nobody understands it. Of course, he understood a lot more than he gave on, but he had clarity and confidence, not because he had all the answers, but because he believed that he could work with the unknown, and the self-efficacy drove him to figure out a way. And I've used this process, the Feynman technique, in my own studies over and over and over again. And I don't use it all the time, but when I'm wrestling with difficult philosophy or new business models I have to master, the point is never perfection. The point is engagement. And once you start breaking things down on the belief that you really can figure it out, do it regularly and something's going to click. Procedural memory will help you. And you'll stop waiting for permission. You'll stop fearing all those gaps of unknown things that you don't know, because you'll have greater confidence that you can identify those gaps and fill them in, or at least a lot of them, more than enough. And you'll no longer be merely a student. You'll be a builder. And when it comes to building, at least in my experience, you're going to need another personality trait that you work on developing. You've already got it, but it's resilience and grit. And one story that might help inspire you is Helen Keller. A lot of people know it, so I'll go through it quite briefly, but she dealt with blindness, with deafness, and yet she wrote 14 books, I believe. And let's not romanticize all that accomplishment. She went through so much trouble. Imagine not being able to speak. Imagine not being able to understand language and being locked in darkness and silence. And, having parents who just kind of don't know what to do about it all. And then someone comes, an angel in a way, Anne Sullivan. She was a teacher. And, she had a troubled past, and she still found it in her heart to help Helen connect. And as I remember the story, if I remember it correctly, Helen put the pieces together. Language was born as one hand is under water and the other hand has this sensation of the letters water being written onto the palm of her hand. Working on that from that point on was grit and resilience. And before that, I'm sure she had lots of grit and resilience. But it wasn't just Helen's grit and resilience. It was Anne's too. And this is an important point. Resilience isn't always a solo act. It's not something that you have to do on your own. It can take 2 people. It can take 3 people. It can take many, many people, thousands of people. Just think of how you're listening to this or watching this now. How many people have been involved in the mutual struggle to give birth to in the internet, refusing to give up on the possibility that we can get together? Stephen Hawking, he had help too. He had caregivers, he had physicist friends, he had a device that helped him keep teaching long after ALS tried to silence him. He once said, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And that's also what resilience is. That's what grit is. It's facing the conditions that you have, whatever they are, choosing to adapt and make movement anyway. Now, I don't believe that constraints are destiny. I don't believe there's fate and that somehow you are gifted with your problems. But nonetheless, they are launch pads, and this links to self-efficacy. It's not just that you have to take action, but if you believe that you actually can make forward movement, well, you can start building this trait today just simply by redefining your limits. Write down one thing you think you can't do, and then find a way to take one small step anyway. Reframe your setbacks. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what can this teach me about how I learn and how I might learn better in the future? And if you doubt that your brain can adjust, read The Experience Machine by Andy Clark. It's all about predictive processing. And these kinds of exercises can help you very, very much rewire your brain so that you are building resilience, but predicting that you'll have more and more resilience in the future, and then you'll get it. You can also borrow grit. So I'm mentioning Helen Keller, I'm mentioning Hawking, I'm mentioning all these people that I've talked about today, Bruno, and on and on. Read the biographies of these people, people who overcame serious obstacles, and write down the patterns they used and followed in their lives. Not just that they had autodidactic personality traits, but that they built them by taking action. And sometimes they created friction deliberately by creating challenges for themselves, like we saw with Benjamin Franklin. So create a little challenge for yourself each week that makes you uncomfortable, and do it on purpose. And then, like Franklin did, rule out various ways of doing it that might cause you harm. But once you're done, use journaling to reflect on what the journey into grit taught you. And build a support system. Find people you can learn with. Get a coach or a mentor who can be your Anne Sullivan, someone who reminds you to keep going when things get hard. Personally, I've faced lots and lots of battles in my life. Confusion, creative burnout, health issues, and on and on. But what got me through wasn't just discipline. It was curiosity, commitment, it was accountability. And when you combine all three, it helps you get the grit that you need so that you don't just survive setbacks. You create in spite of them and also use them as a fuel sometimes. So sometimes you move forward because of those setbacks, and also just to help others, which is in many of the great spiritual and philosophical traditions where the real pleasure switches on, doing it for anybody other than yourself, because there really isn't one if you think about it. Now, speaking of that weird philosophical idea that there is no self and I don't exist, well, this is one thing that Bruno basically gestured at, I believe, in much of his memory training books. There's metacognitive awareness. And I started asking weird questions that showed an early inclination for metacognitive awareness. Like I used to ask, I remember sitting on the porch with my friend Dave, why do they call the sky blue? I mean, how do we know that it's actually blue? What is blue anyway? And, it got annoying to some of my friends. But I kept going, and eventually I started to notice more about my thinking. What is it in the brain that actually has words like this? And I think, too, about Barbara Oakley. She flunked math, but she still wound up becoming an engineer, a professor, and an amazing teacher that's reached millions and millions of people through learning how to learn. But she had to start to analyze her thought patterns. And then she had to analyze how she was learning. Why was she flunking math and just finding math so miserable? And once she understood that, she was able to rebuild her thought patterns. And then for learning, she started to use spaced repetition. And she analyzed how she was using it to get better and better and better. And I've done the same. I do spaced repetition a little bit differently than Barbara Oakley. I use the memory palace technique, which you can learn about in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. But the point is, once you start thinking about your own learning processes, how you memorize information, everything changes. And you can gain leverage over yourself and stop learning so randomly because you're thinking about how you're thinking. Even thinking about the nature of randomness itself strategically. And before we get to Da Vinci and this little problem in his autodidactic personality profile, let's review a key points. In my experience, many of the personality traits required to drive learning and accomplishment, they just simply don't appear out of nowhere. Yes, certain things come from nature, and those things need to be nurtured in so many cases. But what does that mean? It means that success ultimately comes from habits that we install, and ideally we install them intentionally. And that's why I created for you the Self-Education Blueprint. And soon I'll be running a new online workshop that goes even deeper into how you can design your ideal learning system based on the principles of the Self-Education Blueprint and dig deeper into how you're going to work on these personality traits that we've been talking about today. In the workshop, I'll walk you through the exact strategies. I've turned my messy ideas into books that have been read by thousands of people, courses that have been attended by thousands of people, and also just well-honed personal learning systems again and again and again. So I have time to sit around reading all these books and thinking deep thoughts about them. And it's just going to be a lot of fun. And it starts with the self-education blueprint, which you can complete completely on your own, and join us if you like. The people who make the most progress at the end of the day, they don't just read about autodidacticism, accelerated learning techniques, they live them. So if you're interested, you can get this powerful guide at magneticmarymethod.com/SEB for self-education blueprint, and you'll be notified of the upcoming workshop when it's ready. All right, so I've mentioned accountability, and this is where we come back to Da Vinci. And the man of the hour, the great notebook keeper, who has inspired so many of us, this original Renaissance man. His ideas, extraordinary. His projects, endless. But here's the part that a lot of people don't like to admit. So many of them were never finished. We're talking about half-built inventions, scattered diagrams, brilliant beginnings left dangling like, I don't know, torn banners after a festival. It's just wild, right? And I'm not criticizing Da Vinci at all. I'm extracting a lesson for us. I admire Da Vinci so much, but his life reveals something that so many self-learners don't want to face about themselves, or they know it about themselves, but they haven't figured out a way to get past it. And I don't want to make it a cliche. Starting is easy, finishing is hard. No, starting can be very hard and finishing can be easy. Life's complicated that way, especially when your mind is alive with 1,000 sparks and every idea feels like a new doorway to something grand. But learning, real learning, requires closure, and it requires the absence of a personality trait that you don't have to work on improving. You have to work on getting rid of it. So you got to be able to return to the draft. You got to sit with the mess. You got to do the boring bits. And you have to show up even after the magic fades and the self-doubt keeps setting in again and again. And you need accountability, but that accountability has to get rid of the poison, the absolute goal-shattering, dream-destroying mess and menace that is perfectionism. So I've dealt with perfectionism, and I got into some problems with this second memory detective novel, a sequel called Vitamin X. I nearly abandoned this, and I still have some steps to go, but I finally got through the 8th draft. And I got through it partly by sharing my struggles with the people in this audience, because I mentioned before, you don't always have to do it all on your own. But again and again and again, I got into so many troubles with perfectionism because I kept thinking, well, people really loved part 1, which is called Flyboy, and I don't want to disappoint them. And then I thought, oh, well, I have to make it so that people who didn't read Flyboy will understand what's going on in Vitamin X. And I was just getting hung up in so much perfectionism. But I was reading about Da Vinci at the time, and I made a choice. I put this printed copy of the manuscript on my desk, and it is filled with red marks on every page, but I saw it. I created a ritual to edit daily, no matter how discouraged I was, no matter how badly I felt, no matter how lacking in fun it was, because I kept thinking about the projects that Da Vinci left unfinished. Because this one, I'm not going to be happy in my life if Vitamin X isn't finished. And so eventually, the 8th draft got finished. I sent it to some of my closest friends, and I got feedback quite quickly. And also there's little points that they think that might be useful if I changed. But there's glory in it. Even if no one ever reads it other than my friends, I got it done. And that quiet glory, more than enough for me. I won't be haunted if I don't ever publish it. Of course, I am going to publish it eventually here. But the point is for you, is that it's accountability, not as punishment, but as freedom, but it required getting rid of perfectionism. So if you want to help yourself in your life, and you want to master and explore and create something big by this time next year, get it visual in your world. put it on a calendar, print out the draft version of the book. I mean, you can do this now on Amazon. You just get someone to design a cover and you can put it out, and it's just a throwaway copy, but it'll be real on your desk. Or use mind maps. I've had mind maps on my desk sometimes for over a year to remind me of a project that I need to get done. That's what happened with a course I made called Brain Exercise Bootcamp. It got done because I made it non-negotiable, something real I could look at every day. And then just have sacred rituals, whether it's study rituals or production rituals. I find this very useful. Same time of day, same place, without negotiation. With deadlines, or deadlines that somehow are soft but work. So with Vitamin X, I have to edit every day. When I wrote Vitamin X, it has to be 2,000 words every day. And so, yeah, I don't have a goal for like when it has to be finished. Just know that it has to be that many words a day, and I've written enough books that I know that that's about 45 days, and it'll be done. And the thing with writing books and projects that are like that is the more you get into them, the more you're going to be able to write pretty much automatically. And then, yes, you'll get into perfectionism like I got into with Vitamin X. But the key is to just look for the perfectionism and then get back into producing, sharing, and getting feedback. And that's how you move from inspiration to execution again and again and again. And you can't let it stop you, because just as you can rewire your brain positively, you can rewire it negatively. And I was falling into that trap with this book project. And now I have better momentum because I recognized it, nipped it in the bud, and next time I'll recognize it even better. So please, please don't wait for the perfect moment. We all know that someday never comes, and don't wait for perfectionism, because it's not going to happen. And I'm seeing this again and again with my Memory Palace Bookshop project, where, I'm trying to write the play and there's actors missing and there's parts of the theater falling around my eyes all the time. And there's this queen of so many illogical rules and regulations breathing down my neck. Oh my goodness. And yet it's still all coming together piece by piece. Why? Well, in your life, it's because you showed up. That's the only place the magic happens, when you're there. And that's the ultimate lesson that I've learned from Da Vinci. Not his vision, not his talent, not his curiosity, but his struggle with completing things because of perfectionism. And it didn't stop him, obviously. But for the rest of us, I hope that this helps stopping, because that's been my most helpful mantra. Stop stopping. So if you'd like to have more help with not leaving so many threads around that you didn't tie up, get subscribed. If you're new here, thanks for hitting that thumbs up, and get the self-education blueprint. And if you need more help and you want to learn more about autodidacticism, you now know how to train all of these autodidactic personality traits, but you can carry on and build more curiosity about what autodidacticism is, what it involves, by watching How to Become an Autodidact next. Thanks so much for being with me, and until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic.